Welcome back to the Global Gratitude Summit. I'm Luann Saraga Walters.
And I'm Sharon Saraga Walters.
And we have such an amazing show for you today. The woman who's on, she's an amazing author, and her words, her vision of reality shaped the way Sharon and I now see reality. And I bet that after hearing her out-of-the-box thoughts on life, she's going to change your views as well. Pam Grout is the author of 18 books, with E Squared landing in the #1 spot on the New York Times bestseller list. You've probably seen her introspective and empowering articles in Huffington Post, People Magazine, National Geographic, Travel and Leisure, The Washington Post, or many others. And a running theme in her writing is how to take back our lives from the clutches of our own high anxiety minds to intentionally reframe our thoughts and our realities. And one of the tools she uses to do that is gratitude. Pam, welcome. We're so glad to have you here today.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. When you said you were doing a gratitude summit, it's like, oh yes, I'm down with that. So thank you for having me on. It's my favorite topic.
Yeah, we saw that blog post and Sharon wanted to ask you about that. So why don't we start off with that?
So I love that. You said that gratitude is your wingman. Tell us about that.
Oh yeah, I've called it all kinds of different things, but yeah, I did just, I guess, use that term in a recent post. Yeah. So I use gratitude for everything, everything. It's good for everything from manifesting to changing relationships to, getting money. I mean, no matter what it is, if you use gratitude, it is this all-purpose tool, kind of like duct tape, it's good for everything.
I like the duct tape reference too. Yeah. That's funny. Well, your message is really empowering. I first read, your first book that I read was E Squared, and then read Think and Grow Rich recently, which really it's a transformative way of looking at yourself, which people aren't used to. So my first question to you is, when did you actually begin to see how you impacted your life?
Well, it's really funny because I don't know if you've heard the story, but E Squared actually came out about 10 years before under a different title. And it just, dove into the sea of literary has-beens. Nobody read it. I mean, the 5 people that read it loved it. But, it just didn't do anything. It went out of print. So I brought it back out, and I, changed the title to E Squared. It was originally called God Doesn't Have Bad Hair Days. And so I changed it to E Squared, and it had 10 experiments in the first one, and then the second one had 9 experiments. But I really, right before it came out in January of 2013, I had launched what I call my AA 2.0 program, which I talk about in Think and Grow Rich. But it's about gratitude, and I started really focusing my life on gratitude. So I always like to say my frequency was raised. So the same book came out, 10 years different, but as I became more in that joyful frequency, as I became more willing to accept the blessings, I opened up the channel, so to speak. And then my book just, soared onto the #1 spot in the New York Times bestseller list, which is every author's biggest dream, So it's really interesting. Same person, same book, 10 years later, but more on a frequency of gratitude. And then, this other result ended up happening. And also, I was ready for it. But again, it's all about, what we see out there, of course, is a result of what we're thinking in here. The world out there is just a hologram of our thoughts. It's really just a mirror reflection. So as my thoughts about myself changed, as my gratitude channels opened up, then this book, I was in a place where I could accept, the abundance of a best-selling book and, all that goes with it, the traveling all over the world and speaking to people all over the world. So I was just ready. And so I believe gratitude played a huge part in that.
And that's fantastic, but you're also such a self-aware person. Well, you have a great wit, but you have a sense of yourself, which I love reading about that because, and you talk about it with fun and witticisms, but it's also very introspective. Were you always an introspective person?
Oh, wow. I think I always have been. Basically, I was a preacher's kid. So, I was taught certain things about the way the world works that now I see from a whole different perspective. But, when you grow up in that environment, you do tend to think about things. So I would say I am introspective. And also as a writer, I'm a creator. So I believe that, you're always thinking about things and how you want to look at the world. And so it's something that's been interesting to me, something I've enjoyed, looking at what caused this and why did this happen. So yeah, I would say that I've been introspective from the time I was a child.
And that means that you've also not been afraid to accept responsibility.
Well, exactly. That's the same thing. You have to realize that it's you. You know, that picture you're seeing out there, that hologram you're seeing out there is coming from you. You know, we're all interacting constantly with the big quantum field, and we're seeing, you know, a picture of what's in our thoughts. We're seeing a picture of what's out there. And that's why gratitude, when you start getting on that frequency of gratitude, where you really do recognize the blessings, because there's blessings all the time. I mean, just soaring around us forever. And a lot of times we don't see them. I heard somebody say once that, you know, those people that, you know, were walking across when the Red Sea was parted, they're probably going, oh, there's mud between my toes. I mean, here's this miracle happening, you know, the seas are parting and people are walking through and they're worried about their sandals in the mud. You know what I mean? It's like there's so many great things happening all the time, and we only become aware of them as we become, you know, more grateful, as we start looking for that, because we animate into our lives whatever we put our attention upon, right? So if we put our attention on all the blessings and the miracles, we start getting, or at least noticing, more blessings and miracles. I like to believe that they're always there. It's just that, you know, our ability to see them, our ability to connect with them. I said in E Squared that everything that we want, all the goodness of the world, is already within us, but it might be up on the 10th floor and we're still down on the first floor with our consciousness. So it's there, but we've got to figure out an elevator somehow to get on that other frequency. Or I often say, a lot of times, you can't watch ABC if you're tuned into NBC. You have to get tuned into the right frequency to be able to, you know, get what's on the 10th floor or, you know, wherever it might be. But we're connected already to it, but you just have to, you know, open that channel, that frequency, to where you can access that thing.
That's, you actually, that strikes me from a passage in I'd love it if you'd read that passage.
The one you just talked about?
Yes, in Think and Grow Rich, Think and Grow Rich, you talk about perspective and how to see things differently. Because just before we go into that, I think that there's a commonality in life that we get up, we go through, we get into, you know, for example, you get a new job. You're excited. Everything is fresh. It's the honeymoon phase. The walls are shiny. The desk is glittery. And after a few weeks or months, right, it gets mundane. And so then things start to look blah. But what you write about in that passage is how to shift that mindset, you know, and I love that. So would you do that?
I'd love to.
I would love to.
Okay. The party favor. In this book, I have, you know, like the principle, and then I have what I call party favor, which is basically a story about it. So this is the party favor from one of the games, party game number 12, I guess it is. But anyway, the party favor, put everything into perspective. And then the quote is, let's be unrealistic together. A greeting card I saw at Hobbs, the host of Cool in Lawrence, Kansas. Okay, so I've been accused of being unrealistic, a crazy idealist, not in touch with the real world. It's impossible, my detractors insist, for someone to live in gratitude all the time. Shit happens, and I would be the first to agree. However, 99.9% of life, even during the shitstorm, still operates in perfect working order, continues to run as efficiently as that annoying Energizer bunny. Right now, for example, my body is emitting 2.5 tons of atmospheric pressure that keep me from flying off into space. That is a frickin' miracle. 99.9% of my life is a frickin' miracle. Anyone who thinks life is nothing but an ordeal is clearly deluded. For the sake of argument, let's take a count. Number 1, the skirt you wanted to wear to work is wrinkled in the laundry basket. Number 2, the freeway's crowded with bozos on their cell phones. And 3, your boss doesn't get you. And you were created from stars. Free liquid falls from the sky. Do you know how remarkable that is? You live on a planet with just the right amount of oxygen and just the right ratio of just the right gases. Each of your cells has thousands of mitochondria that create energy so you can give the finger to me and all the other optimists. And I'm just getting started. I'm not suggesting we play ostrich and stick our head in the sands of La La Land. But why devote so much of our lives to the 1/10 of 1% that isn't working? Deal with the wrinkled skirt and the boss. And never forget that one of your body's 100 trillion cells came from the division of one single cell. And that millions of new cells are being born every hour to replace the old ones, without, I might add, any input on your part. Thousands of things have already gone right for you today. So what if your tie has a peanut butter stain or your 7-year-old refused to get out of bed for breakfast? The vast majority of everything is working with breathtaking efficiency. Methinks the only responsible position is to use the same pie chart, for my life. I choose to divide the 1,040 minutes of my day into the same ratio, 0.1% for managing the shit, and 99.9% for celebrating the good, the true, and the beautiful. It's also worth noting that once I started celebrating the good, the true, and the beautiful, the 0.1% became a distant memory.
That's so awesome.
Great.
You know, when you're writing that, what are you drawing on? You're just, it's so personable. I mean, as I was reading all of the passages in your books, I'm going, that's me, wow, that's me. But you say it better than I think it. So, you know.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, you know, you said, oh, well, you read this passage. I'm like, I wonder which passage she's going to want, because, you know, different people relate to different passages. But one of the big things I do, and a book that I had, my most recent book that came out was called Art and Soul Reloaded. And I talk in there about appealing to the muses. Like literally before I write, I say this invocation to the muses. And, you know, you can call it the bigger thing, God. You can call it, you know, the field of infinite potentiality, which is what I tend to call it in Eastward. But this bigger thing. So I want to write what it wants me to write. You know what I mean? I feel like I want to be the secretary for the divine. That's my mission. What I have to say, my little pea brain tends to be kind of limited, but I feel like the more I can access that bigger thing, the better my writing's going to be. So that's always my hope. That's always my, like I said, invocation to muses. I literally have one that I've written out that I say before I start writing, you know, oh, great muses, please, you know, use me. Let me be a channel for you. So anyway, as to where that stuff comes from, I don't always know. And I think, I mean, you know, it's the stuff I'm interested in. You know, each of us is an expression of, you know, the infinite field. We're each an expression. And so I want to be the best expression that I can be of that infinite field. You know, how the universe is seeing, you know, reality through me, how I'm expressing reality, you know, through me.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Did you have another?
Yeah, I was just kind of curious, like now that you have more than 5 people, once you change the title of the book and you have so many, was there any stories, favorite stories that have come from other people from reading the book and having the parties?
Oh my goodness. That, you know, that's been one of the greatest things about writing the book, is that every day I open my email and I get an email from people all over the world. And it usually starts with something like, you are never going to believe this. And of course I believe it, because, you know, that's what I write about. But I have just been so blessed. I have gotten so many miracle stories. In fact, E cubed, which is the follow-up to E squared, I've got a chapter in there. It's called Well, Duh. And it lists a lot of the different stories that people have sent to me. And oftentimes on my blog too, I'll do stories in there. I have a little thing on my blog. I do why I'm the luckiest person on the planet. You know, episode 1, 2, 3 goes on. A lot of times I'll list like these stories that people sent to me. And, you know, I just get the greatest stories, and it's just so much fun. I mean, literally like, oh, wow, what's going to be the new installment today? What am I going to hear about today? So it's been really, really fun.
That's great.
That's a neat way to blossom through. You know, you said you grew up as were you a PK, a pastor?
I was a PK, yeah. My dad was a Methodist minister.
Oh, okay. Well, so it's interesting because you're so familiar with the infinite field and the buzz, and you know, that's not necessarily something that, well, in my Christian tradition background, I didn't grow up with that. What was your process of growing into this whole amazing universe?
Well, I think it was sort of inevitable, you know, that I was going to meet this, because I was interested in the bigger mysteries and the questions of life. But it just, like what I was told, I mean, isn't that the struggle for all of us? Or I don't struggle, I don't like to call it that. The search for all of us is to, what do we really think? What do we really, you know, what are we really meant to do? Because we'll be given this picture, this dominant culture that is, you know, fed into us, and then we can, you know, collapse the wave and believe that's the way it is, or we can discover the bigger thing. Like I talk a lot about, do you want to live in problem state or do you want to live in possibility state? Yeah. And there are literally endless possibilities out there. And the more we open to that, the more these endless possibilities will play out in our lives. So we have to kind of give up everything we know. Like, reality that we see is basically just like a snapshot in time, but we think, that's what it is, but then we collapse the wafer, and that's what we end up seeing over and over again. That, quantum physicists tell us that basically what we see is like an icon on our computer. It's really just leading us into an area that we can understand, but because there's so much movement and so much going on that we don't even really completely understand it. So I just want to be open to the mystery. So as far as how I got into it, I started reading books. I've always been a huge reader, so I read books. I went to a workshop once when I was just right out of college, and it was, I live near where Unity Church is, and so it was a gal that was a teacher from there, and it was sort of based on A Course in Miracles. And I would say, my path is mostly Course in Miracles. I mean, Course in Miracles is really about all in on, our thoughts create our reality. There is no ifs, ands, or buts, and that joy and unceasing joy is our natural state, and that is what we can access. So that was sort of my entree in, just being an avid reader. And I'd say Course in Miracles and then that little class that I took. And then, of course, you just want to know more. You just, want to find out more. And so now I'm just, I've become a student of all these metaphysical things. I mean, if there's a new book coming out, I like to read it or I like to write it, one of the two.
Well, and I also love your being a passion of, I have my own passion for science too, but you've got a great handle on it. And it's not always easy to read something and interpret it so that people can understand what how the science metaphysically ties, there's, so where did that come from? And then how do you find, I just love that now science is showing, which is why we're doing the Gratitude Summit, that science is showing what we already know, what we've intuitively known for centuries, and that now we're starting to see these, which you talk about. So thank you for being on the summit. But where did that science interest come from, and how do you find the stuff, and what's that process like for you?
Well, I think if you're going to write, you have to appeal to all different people. And some people, want to hear the miracle stories. They don't need the science. But there's always those people that want to know, well, how could that possibly be true? People that have, maybe the left brain, or maybe it's I can't remember which is which, the one that wants that scientific background. So you have to kind of think of different ways to explain it to people. And quantum physics really does, prove everything that the Course in Miracles says, everything that, the great wise sages have been saying for centuries. It's really nice to be able to open up, some prestigious scientific journal that says, see, this really does work. But the thing that was kind of cool about E Squared, and I think the reason people liked it, you can read anything from a science journal, or you can hear it from, a pulpit or a book. You have to see it with your own two eyes. And that's what E Squared did. It set up experiments for people to do. It gave them 48 hours. Say, okay, here's the principle that I believe. Here's the principle that to me is a, 100% principle that's going to work 100% of the time. Try this out in your own life. I set it up with the science experiments and little lab report sheets. And so I think that's why people loved it, because, it's like, yeah, tell me, I heard that before. I want to see it in my own life. I want to see it with my own two eyes. And I think that's what really made it fun for people. There's I don't know if you guys ever did the Einstein wands, the one where, the wands follow your thoughts. Did you guys try that when it was experiment?
Yes.
Oh, you did try that. Well, if you look on YouTube, there's all these videos of people that have done that, and it's really, really fun. It's something I often will take to my play shops, my workshops, so people can actually do it. So, It's like, wow, how can we doubt, or how can we say that our thoughts don't have any magnetic pull, or that we're not actually creating things when you watch these wands, moving around depending on what you're thinking. So it was just a fun thing to kind of get people to really truly see for themselves this stuff works.
Using the science.
She was great at the wands. I mean, when we had people over for dinner parties, they did not leave until they experienced. She would show it, and then they would experience.
We had your book on our coffee table for about a year, and every time somebody would come over, I would take the hangers. And for those viewers and listeners who aren't familiar, you take a hanger, undo it, a wire hanger, form it into an L shape, and then gently hold it in your hand. Think of something that's in a certain direction. So like I'd stand in the middle of the living room, and I'd think of the garage. And the garage happens to be to the right. So these divining rods, which are hangers in my hands, would both swing over to the right. But I was thinking that I was doing it somehow. Subconsciously, I was moving them. You know, I was trying to watch my hands just because I was the doubting Thomas. I was like, no, something I'm doing. So I got some straws and I held onto the straws just really gently. So, and then they turned. And then I started to hold them in each hand and I'd spin them this way and I'd spin them this. It was fascinating. I
It
love
is
that.
fascinating. Yeah, and the thing I always like to do is I have people think of negative thoughts and then watch how those rods tend to go in on themselves. But then you think of a positive thought like life is beautiful. Again, gratitude. You think in terms of gratitude, and the wands go out. So it just kind of shows where your energy's going. Like, is your energy going to go in and cave in on itself, or is it going to go out and be more expansive? So those wands are really good for doing that. And I've had so many fun stories. Like I said, there's a lot of YouTube ones, but one time, this is to me how remarkable the universe is. I was down in Mexico City giving a lecture or a workshop on this. And so one of my wands somehow fell out of my backpack. It's like, oh, how can I prove this with one wand? So I'm literally walking down the street in Mexico City and I feel something on my foot and there's a wire down there. I literally manifested a wire that I tripped over practically. And I, was able to fold it into my next, the other one of the divining rods. So I call them the Einstein wands, and they've been a whole lot of fun. That's one of the, again, because it's so visual, that's just been a nice one that a lot of people have enjoyed.
And it's a great way to see it. And like you said, I didn't even think about the negative thoughts and then the positive thoughts opening up, but we're actually seeing that within our bodies. And on the summit, we have different doctors of different practices in different areas of our, whether it's mental or even relationship, marriages and whatnot, speaking to how when we close ourselves in, that's what happens. And so your book really was able to show that and open it up. And when you're speaking about our ability to transform ourselves through our minds, there can be some resistance to that. Just like I had resistance to, or am I really physically doing the wands, or is my mental doing it? So how do you speak to that you've had to have some people come up to you and go, well, I'm a doubting Thomas on that too. I'm not responsible for every crappy thing that's happened in my life. Because that's a big amount of responsibility to take on. What do you say to that?
Well, again, I like people to experiment for themselves, but I feel like I wrote the book Think and Go Rich to answer those people's questions. Like, oh, why didn't this work for me? Sure, it works for everybody, so it doesn't work for me. And I always use that example of Jack Nicholson in that movie where Tom Cruise has him up on the witness stand, and he says, "Did you order Code Red?" And he keeps badgering him, and finally Jack Nicholson, his face turns red, and he goes, "You can't handle the truth." And some people, maybe aren't ready for the truth. But I think gratitude is the thing that helps us get ready for the truth. It's kind of an easy thing. They say even looking for things to be grateful for, even if you can't find anything, just the act of looking for something actually supplies dopamine and serotonin to your brain. If you test out these chemicals, it literally is dumping these chemicals into your brain that make you feel better. Just the act of looking for it. It's like, man, if anybody offered you these great drugs, wouldn't you take them? And this is what gratitude can do, all these free drugs and that make you happier, that make you appreciate life. Just about every single thing. Like I said, it's an all-purpose tool. Using gratitude, it just changes everything.
One thing I would love to hear, we've been asking everyone and I'd love to hear yours, what your personal definition is of gratitude.
That's going to be hard because she has infused her life with gratitude, but that is an interesting question.
Or even today, what would that be?
Gratitude, I've called it, my GPS. But, it's kind of the joy frequency. Mm-hmm. It's the frequency of joy where, everything you see that divine buzz, you see that power, that life, that beauty in everything. So that's being in a state of gratitude. Yes, it's about saying thank you, but it's also about this other life force, this energetic force that's out there. So to me, gratitude is sort of the it's like what our human mind can understand on how to access that other thing that's kind of bigger than us. So gratitude to me is like a portal, I guess you could say, into the divine, into the buzz.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
that's good. Thank you. I wanted to hear yours specific.
Yeah, and I didn't know what I was going to say, but okay, that sounded all right.
I wasn't sure either, but I wanted to hear it.
I know, it's wonderful, and something that people, well, we said at in the introduction that you also write for Travel and Leisure and National Geographic, and I like your blog, George Clooney Slept Here. Just,
Right.
I know we're talking about gratitude, but for people who love to travel and are very grateful to travel, like Sharon and myself, we love travel any chance we can. Where'd that come from?
Well, I've written for a lot of different travel magazines, travel websites over the years. And at one point, when magazine industry kind of dried up, I thought, okay, I better start my own blog. And I was just trying to think, it's kind of fun to do luxury travel. And so, you've heard of that George Washington slept here. It was an old, slogan that people would use all the time. George Washington slept here. And so I thought, okay, George Clooney slept here. So it's just a little takeoff on that. It's kind of funny, though, since I started, I've heard from George Clooney's English teacher. I've had people from third world countries saying, George, please give us some money. I mean, people think he's involved. I don't know. It's just my little funny thing that I did. Except for a while when I first started, I had this cardboard cutout of George Clooney, and I'd take it with me, and I'd do a selfie, with me and this cardboard cutout. But that was like, it's hard to carry a cardboard cutout of George Clooney, so that didn't last very long, and it kind of ended up being just, the name. But it's just kind of a funny name. But people do ask me about that often, so.
That's fun. And so, wow. And this has been fun. This has been just a lot of fun to have you, and very actually eye-opening and heart-opening and mind-opening. And thank you for your work. Thank you for applying your natural inquisitiveness into your writing and sharing the skill that you have in your writing to really make sense of some big questions. But you do it in such an easy manner it's like having a good meal and you just want to keep eating more of it. So I really appreciate your skill set, what you're doing to change the world in one book at a time with a couple of 100,000 million readers. I mean, gosh, you've contributed a huge amount to Sharon and myself in our life and made a huge impact on that.
Yes, I thank you so much. I mean, I love that how you brought the science, because I'm not really into the science as much, but when you brought the science and then you brought the party favors, now you got me. Bringing the party favors to science, fun, and gratitude. Thank you so much for what you do.
Yeah, thank you guys for your wonderful work and for having a gratitude summit. I mean, how amazing is that? We're going to change the whole frequency of the planet thanks to you guys. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Absolutely. And if you want more of Pam Grout, you've got her books from everywhere on Amazon, but also go to pamgrout.com. You can go to George Clooney Slept Here, which is another awesome travel bit, and look for her in a variety of articles, newspapers and magazines and more. And in the credits, we will have her website and a few other additions. So thanks again, Pam. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day, guys. Bye.